Welcome to the Professionals of the Inland Empire show with your host, John Tulac.
And welcome to Professionals of the Inland Empire, which we affectionately call PI. I'm John Tulac. I'm an international business attorney located in Claremont, California. And Professionals of the Inland Empire was designed to showcase our phenomenal talent in the professional community who live and work in the Inland Empire. These are people who have the skills, the experience, the knowledge to help you, the business owner, with what you need and even what you want to achieve in your business. Today, we have with us Cynthia Flynn, Hackler Flynn and Associates. She goes by Cindy with her friends and her good clients. And she is an employment lawyer focusing on the defense side. So she's working on behalf of you, the business owner, in this increasingly complicated world of employment law, particularly in the state of California. So you know what to do by now if you're a regular listener. Sit back and help yourself to a slice of pie. Here we go. Welcome, Cindy, to Professionals in the Inland Empire.
Thank you, John. It's so nice to be here today.
So tell us who you are and what you do and how you got there. You have a good story to tell.
Oh, okay. Well, so I always knew I was going to be a lawyer from like the age of 5. My parents ran a printing company. It was called Gap Printing. It was actually located in Orange, California, and it was called Gap. G stood for Glenn, my dad's name. A stood for Angie, my mom's name, and P stood for printing. And back in the day, I would go in there and I would help fold the brochures. I would punch out the business cards. And I really saw what it was like to run a business and then to be an employer here in our wonderful state of California. And over the time that my parents had this business, they just got hit with so many employment issues and so many business issues. One person on their team fell down their flight of stairs. They refused to file for workers' comp. It ended up being this huge disaster for my parents. Somebody else accused them of nepotism because they hired my dad's sister, which was a disaster. They just had so many employment issues and they didn't know how to handle them. So when I was in high school, I ended up getting a job at an employment law firm. I was there for 8 years through high school, college, and law school. And then, I got out of law school. I worked at a couple different firms. And this month, I'm actually celebrating 12 months in business at my firm, Hackler Flynn and Associates.
12 months or 12 years?
Sorry, 12 years. Yes, 12 months. 12 years, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, 12 years.
And one thing that's special about your firm is that it is all women, except, unless you've changed this recently, except for your receptionist, right?
Actually, it has changed recently. We are all women. I am actively interviewing, though. I'm interviewing for just the best candidate. It doesn't matter of, male, female, or anything else. But we happen to be all women attorneys and all women paralegals at this point.
It was a good talking point, I always thought.
Memorable, right?
One of the things that makes you stand out is what makes you different, and that was certainly one of them. So, just so you all know, folks out there, Cindy and her firm are my go-to people for employment law matters when my business clients need that assistance. As outside general counsel, I have to know quite a bit, but that quite a bit gets pretty intense beyond a certain point, and that's then beyond my pay grade, to use the slang expression. That's when you really can't rely on doing it yourself or doing it with your regular business attorney who doesn't have the experience. That's when you need the particular expertise. And Cindy, tell us why. Tell us what's so special about California.
Well, if you have somebody who's working for you in California, California has a lot of employment laws regarding that, everything from independent contractors, which is very hard to do, by the way. I still have clients today coming to me with independent contractor issues. I have clients who want to talk through severance if they're, letting somebody go. But most of the time I'm dealing with clients who didn't come to us soon enough, and then they're being sued by, a current or former employee of their company. And when it comes to employment law, it's so important to dot all your I's and cross all your T's and make sure you're buttoned up as possible in order to protect yourself and, the company that you've built.
Exactly. And preventive law is, at the end of the day, always a lot less expensive than fixing a problem, especially in employment law after it comes up. So it's a place where it's just not worth it to try and save a few bucks. Get the help early. So I know that you work a lot with lawyers like me and others who have business clients, but I think you also work with the HR consultants. So there are HR consultants, large and small, that can advise small business about complying with state and federal law. But I've also seen that sometimes they miss things that lawyers catch. So
Yeah,
how does that go?
absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you a quick story about a client of ours. We represented a tech company, and this is one of those startups that really believed culture was built on kombucha and hoodies and unlimited everything. So naturally, their holiday party was all you could eat, all you can drink, and the employees took that mandate very seriously, right? So as the night started winding down, the CEO, feeling really festive, invited everyone back to his townhome in Santa Monica. Now, if you're thinking, this is where the problem starts, you're right, but I couldn't even have predicted what came next. The CTO, who had apparently decided that this was the perfect moment to expand his horizons, announced that he was going to try LSD for the first time at a company event with subordinates present. I mean, what could possibly go on, right? Or go wrong. So, like 45 minutes later, he found someone to fixate on, and it was this gay intern. And he just began berating him, right? Loudly, aggressively, incoherently. Things escalated. Someone called the police. And when the officers arrived, our CTO, still mid-trip, bit one of them in the ankle, John. Yes, he bit a police officer in the ankle. So he was hauled off to jail. The CEO was in shock. The employees were traumatized. And HR, who was not invited to the after party, started calling our office at 6 a.m. on Monday morning in full crisis mode, right? We spent the whole day drafting releases for every single person who had been there. The company was never sued, but by the time we were done, it was unquestionably the most expensive, free holiday party the company ever had. So that's an example of how we work one-on-one with HR in order to avoid the company getting sued.
That's quite a story. And of course, a lot of these problems do come out of good intentions, but not having the knowledge of the consequences legally of those good intentions. And, hell is paved with good intentions, right? The road to hell. There was software that I think now has any HR software that deals with time management for employees checking in and clocking out and so on. This doesn't happen anymore, but it was worked.
No, John. It certainly does.
It's still around that it rounds up, so it will round up to the nearest tenth of an hour. So it's always in the employee's favor, but it's still technically a violation because it's not precise. And one of the business owners that I knew got sued for this and spent six figures settling a pocket claim that he said you weren't conforming to the requirements.
That's exactly right. Our clients I was just having this conversation with somebody this morning. She didn't know in her business that she was not complying with the law. She wasn't trying to steal from their employees. She was just like, I didn't know I could not pay them this way. And so now she's being threatened with a lawsuit and she's scared. A lot of times, like our clients, this is the first time that they're ever being sued. This woman in particular this morning, she's been in business 10 years and she's never been sued. I've had clients be in business for 26 years and this is the first time they're being sued. I've had other clients who had an employee work for them for, 2 hours and they get sued. So it could be like the best, most well-intentioned employer, and then they still have issues.
Yeah, I hate to use the old cliche, ignorance of the law is no excuse, but so many of these technical problems are created by very detailed statutory provisions and regulatory provisions with, mandated fines or penalties. And all a PAGA attorney has to do is find your technical violation. And then the more employees you have, the bigger the claim is, because it's just plug and chug at this point. And that's hard to prevent. Even with work, it's hard to catch all of that, especially when you get a raft of new laws every year. So you have to have really good employment counsel who keeps up with all that stuff. So tell us how you do that, Cindy. You get like 2 hours sleep a night to be able to keep up with all this.
3 hours, yes. So we are always putting on free webinars for our clients and our friends. We've done 2 so far this year, really good turnout. And, we are just going over the newest laws that our friends and our clients need to know about. So we're always, if anyone's interested in being on one of our webinars, you can always email me and I'd be happy to add you to our list. I don't spam anyone, but anytime something comes out where we're like, everybody needs to know this, they're going to get in trouble if they don't, then I send an email. Because I hate when something like this could have been avoided and, the person just didn't know.
Exactly. And again, so many things that are in other areas have impact on employees. So you have privacy laws in California, which are more complicated and more detailed than most of the rest of the country. But if you're doing business nationally, especially if you may have employees in more than one state, we have 20 different versions of privacy laws across the country so far, and I'm sure that will increase by a few more states this year. And if you're doing business internationally, you've got the EU Global Data Protection Law that can apply to a US company. And then again, these are designed primarily to protect consumers, but it also has blowback on employees, right? And so keeping up with the privacy laws, and so you're in compliance with that is another requirement that business owners have to deal with.
Well, and I was just in a actually provisor's event the other day, and someone was asking about background checks and like the little box in order to confirm, that on the application that says that they've never been convicted of a felony. Well, that went out years ago with ban the box, right? Like you can't run a background check on someone without providing a conditional job offer of employment. And so in each area, when you're thinking about hiring, and especially when you're thinking about firing, there's a list of things that you want to make sure you're complying with. So just another way of an employee having the ability to file a lawsuit against our employers here.
Right. And these can come from not only people that you've turned down in the review process, but can also come from someone that you hired, but then, you maybe disclosed something that I didn't have to disclose. And so all these things kind of come together in a very nasty way if you don't dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and make sure that your boxes are only the correct ones.
Right. And a lot of times we need to represent a company who is out of state because they decide to hire one person here as an employee and they do it wrong, or as an independent contractor and they do it very wrong. Right. So it's just part of doing business, I guess, in California.
I suppose that there are still a few narrow areas where an independent contractor status can be justified. But, everything I see that somebody tries to do on their own is no way an independent contractor relationship. So this is one of the worst areas of unforced error because this one, I mean, it's been pretty clear for several years now. You just can't do that in California. So, I mean, what more can we do to get the word out that there is, for most everybody, no such thing as engaging in an independent contractor relationship unless the person you're dealing with has his or her own company and has other parties that they work for.
Right, exactly. And even if you're going to fall under the business exemption, there's 12 things you have to do in order to fall under that. So, yeah, we're still seeing independent contractor issues. And the presumption in California is that every single person who works for you is an employee rather than an independent contractor. And it's on you, the employer, the one who's doing the hiring, to prove otherwise. So the burden just falls more on the employer.
I mean, checklists can help a lot. Like you say, 12 steps to get that. I'm afraid to ask. Maybe you know the answer to this question. How many checklists do you have?
10,000. I have a checklist for everything. I love checklists. If anybody wants a checklist on hiring or termination, I can send you one. I have checklists on everything.
It's the only way to go, actually. And you can use AI for a lot of general stuff, and it'll generate a checklist for you if you ask it. But you have to check the checklist because AI hallucinates.
Well, and is it up to date, right? Exactly. Like check the checklist. Something that was designed 2 or 3 years ago, probably, there are things that have been changed with regard to hiring and onboarding as recent as this month. So, something to keep in mind for sure.
So in California, we've said this for a lot of years now, litigation is a blood sport. And it's increasingly expensive and stressful and time consuming, non-habit forming, except for people who just really get off on it. And so how does a small to medium-sized business try to bulletproof their company against the open door to the courthouse? I mean, you can't prevent a lawsuit from being filed, but you can
Right.
certainly then be in a good position to defend. From the employment lawyer's perspective, how do you prepare your moat, the castle walls, the arrows through, that you could shoot through the openings and so on? How do you do it? How does a company do it?
I mean, with employment lawyers, our top three rules: document, 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 right? And so I'm a huge proponent of, seeing if your employee is going to take a severance agreement when they exit the company. That way, they're waiving any and all claims against you or anyone in the company at the time of separation. As far as your onboarding documents go, making sure they're up to date and regularly updated. Your employee handbooks need to be up to date, your policies, your procedures. We just did an employee handbook that hadn't been updated in the last like 5 years. And we're talking to the employer, is this still relevant to you? Is this? And they're like, no, no, no. So you just want to make sure you're having somebody look at those documents and you're having somebody provide those updates. If your company has employment agreements, there's been some changes there as well, and you can't have certain provisions. And oftentimes clients are like, well, let's throw everything in there to scare them. But you don't want to necessarily do that because, if you put a provision in there that is unenforceable, it could negate the entire contract. So it's just good to spend like a little time every year making sure everything is updated and your employees have signed things that protect you, because while somebody's working for you, that's the best time to get them to sign something, right? It's after you fire them that it makes it a lot harder. So documents, John, documents.
Absolutely. And when I was a young lawyer, my dad was still working and he was with Electrical Optical Systems, which was owned by Xerox. And I got to meet a couple of the Xerox attorneys when I was first in practice, and they showed me their setup, and there was one room, and there was one guy who'd been there forever. He wasn't a lawyer, but he was in charge of the policies and procedures from Xerox that EOS also had to operate under, and it was binder after binder. I mean, literally, there were two walls. It was wall-to-wall binders. And he was pretty proud of the fact that not only was he in charge of this, but he knew where everything else was in those binders. And I looked at it. He was pretty impressed. I said, "Does anybody else know what's in here?" And he said, "Sadly, no."
That is great. Yes.
Of course, we've come a long way since
Yes.
1978 in terms of the need to have that stuff readily accessible. Of course, the computer and the cloud make that all possible, but I still think that's a problem. You can have too much stuff, and then nobody knows where to find it or how to access it or how to interpret it, and then it's just as good as useless.
Yep. You're absolutely right. At least now, though, if you scan that in, it will OCR it and you can find hopefully what you're looking for in a policy. But yeah, it's something to make sure you're buttoned up with.
One of the things that I know you deal with, I have to with it too, is once my clients have been with me for a while, I can kind of train them out of this attitude. But there is a prevailing attitude, especially with small into the medium-sized companies. I don't want to comply. This is a nanny state. This should be revoked, blah, blah, blah. So there's this resistance to compliance. And yet what I have found is the single most important thing to stay out of trouble is to embrace a culture of compliance within the company. And it has to start with the top. If the top people are constantly bad-mouthing compliance, why should everybody else who's tasked with complying, go along with it? Because, the attitude's going to spread. And so
Right.
I'm sure you've encountered that. How do you help instill the culture of compliance besides the fear factor of
Well, it's so
non-compliance?
hard because I represent really good-hearted businesses, right? They are not trying to like get their employees or harm their employees. And a lot of the times it's like I like this relaxed, style and this relaxed culture that I've built in my company. It's okay to bring your dog to work. It's okay to have my brother, come in late. It's okay to have everybody ring the bell for lunch and take their rest break and their lunch break at the same time because I don't want my employees to have to sign in and out. I want to make it more of a family orientation and a relaxed environment. But you're right. I mean, it has to start with the top, and the top has to say how important policies are and how when somebody's not complying with the policy, that there are consequences, right? Just like in raising children. Don't
Absolutely.
listen. There's going to be
Good
consequences.
example.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that's just top of mind because I have three. But, like, it, it, it's a hard thing to implement, but once you implement it, it does become easier. And those who are incapable of following those directions and following the policies that you find important in your culture, they'll weed themselves out, right? If you're going to be stricter about clocking in and clocking out and not paying the extra hour for a missed meal period or, missed rest breaks, then those people are going to weed themselves out. So, it's just something that we have to abide by in California, at least in this point, until somebody lobbies it, lobbies our state and starts making changes. I mean, it comes down to the policies.
Exactly. And I have to say, having some clients out of state, that it's a shock to me especially this happened in Idaho. I had a client there for several years where I was going back and forth a lot. And I mean, Idaho is back in the 50s and 60s with a lot of their laws. And it was just a shock to me. It's like, gee, the law may allow you to do this, but I would not treat your employees this way. I mean, it was really something that I had to make suggestions about best practices simply because of some things that I know from here really work well with the employees, even though there was absolutely no obligation to do that in Idaho. So, there was a clash, on more than one occasion with the board. So you go back to the idea of best practices. The law says one thing, but without a culture of compliance, there will also be resistance to adopting the best practices that are the things that will best keep a company out of trouble. So it's always something that goes along, in my view, with the legal work is that, and here's now some of the best ways to implement this and to explain it to your employees and to demonstrate we're really all in this. We're all in on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard in other states, and I only practice in California, but in other states, you can fire somebody for filing a workers' comp case. If you even mention that here, you will be sued. So it's just such night and day. But I have heard that even though California tends to be leading the charge on being so employee friendly, other states are following suit. So I don't know how true that is, but that's what I've heard as of Friday.
Yeah, and of course, the one thing that used to be a good guidepost is common sense, and I do you'd like
I love that.
that.
So that's common sense.
It just, it doesn't apply in the same way that you might think in California, because some of the things are not intuitive, and especially in terms of some of the technical things that a company has to do for compliance. But what I have found in working with companies elsewhere is, when you've got a good owner and you've got that application of common sense, you have a well-run company, you have happy employees, and I don't want to say they don't know any better, but it works where the system, where the legal framework allows that to work. In California, it simply isn't that way. But the commitment to I want to do what's right, that should never be lost, even if you don't like some of the ways and means by which you have to carry it out, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Best possible protection. So, is there anything in particular in the new statutes and regulations this year that you want to bring to our audience's attention? I mean, getting comfortable with the new stuff is always a work in progress in the
Always
first few
fun.
months
Yeah.
of the year, right?
Yes, absolutely. So there's two things that I want to bring up. One is the Know Your Rights. And California has something that they posted through the California Labor Commissioner. If you can't find it on the website, happy to send you a copy for free. But it's basically more ways for your employees to sue you, and you have to let them know their rights. And so it's a one page, or not one page, it's multiple pages. I think it's 5 pages. But it just goes into more rights your employees have, and what they should do if you, the employer, retaliates against them for exercising any of their rights. And so it goes over like immigration status, your right to organize a union or engage in protected activity in the workplace. The employee's rights when interacting with law enforcement, including immigration agents, which tends to be a hot topic in the last year or so. And then at the end of the notice, the 5-page notice, it's who they can contact if they believe their rights have been violated. So you're required to give that out.
You have to
Something
personally hand it to the employee, right? Or
distribute it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one is the emergency contact information. That the deadline, I believe, is at the end of this month, and you have to tell your employees, or you have to give them this like emergency contact information sheet. But part of that sheet is whether or not you want them, or whether or not they want you to contact their emergency contacts in the event of arrest or not deportation, but where they like pick you up.
Detention.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If the employee ends in detention or arrested. then the form goes through, if you can contact their emergency contact in that case, and they have to affirmatively state yes or no. And employers have until the end of this month to get compliant, as well as with any new employees, they're required to make sure they have the proper form filled out for emergency contact information. So if anyone needs that, I'm happy to send that as well.
These are good things to know. So just another thing, does the Know Your Rights have to be posted on the wall too, along with all the, that's
exactly. All the ways that, the employee can sue you.
How big of a wall do you need today to post all the posters that are required?
I'd say it needs to be a mile by a mile high. So, as long as you have that space, you're totally good.
My secretary has been out on indefinite medical leave, and so I had to tell her about the Know Your Rights thing. And you're supposed to post it. I know you're home, so maybe put it on the back of your front door so it's prominently displayed. He thought it was very funny. I said, go ahead and put it up. Her husband Bill's got a good sense of humor. Let him come home and see it.
Love that. That is great. On the refrigerator, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's someplace where, again, we make light of this, but the poster requirements, I'd say a good number of law firms don't comply with that.
Oh, I know. I was even like, shoot, do I have these up in my office right now? But they're brand new. So
and they change a sentence or two or a word here and there seemingly every year, so you have to replace them. It's good business for a print shop, right? Take it back full circle.
Yes, exactly, John. Yes, if only my parents were still in business. They ended in bankruptcy and divorce, but I knew I wanted to go to law school so I can prevent, hopefully, other families from going through that and to just help the business.
Yeah, I mean, that dedication to a vision from early on, I mean, that was something that really did make you stand out. It makes you special, Cindy. Yeah, it did. It was an unhappy ending story for your parents and their business, but a happy ending in terms of the direction that it gave you. So we are all grateful for that. So believe it or not, that half hour plus has flown by, and
wow.
You can see that we could keep talking about this sort of shop talk for a long time. So Cindy, we're going to have you back on Professional of the Inland Empire. Thank you again for being my guest on the show today. That's it for now, and we'll see you next time with another episode of Professional of the Inland Empire.
Thanks for watching or listening to, depending on the case, the Professionals of the Inland Empire show with your host, John W. Tulac. If you have a suggestion for a guest, email him at jwtulac, that's JWTULAC @gmail.com. jwtulac @gmail.com.